So thank you, Bernard, for the invitation. My name is Peter Larsen. I lecture in anthropology, international governance, and development studies at the University of Lucerne. I've also been fortunate enough to be the project coordinator of a research project funded by the SNIS on World Heritage, human rights in the Asia Pacific, and the global arena. So after launching the idea of making a film with the SNIS, we started having conversations with colleagues in the region to figure out what was the best way to organize the filming, how basically to create a message that was easy to understand, and figure out the practicalities also of organizing filming on the ground. In that respect, that involved discussions, for example, figuring out which research site to use. In the research project, we worked with colleagues in 4 different countries: Philippines, Vietnam, Australia, and Nepal, which each have their different lessons learned, each have their story to tell. In this case, we basically chose to film in Vietnam, which is the country that I also engaged more actively in as the research project coordinator, thereby allowing us to experiment, in a sense, with this new medium of communication. I realized soon that the timing needed to actually do a filming project properly is quite substantial. There's first of all the planning process of figuring out what you actually want to film. There's the doing bit of the logistics of putting in place the arrangements to actually do the filming. There's the actual filming and the footage. And then there's the whole period of editing the images, getting the message straightened out, and putting it into a format that is actually accessible to people. So when we initially went to the field and filmed, I made a few promises. I made promises to local villagers who take part in the film. I made promises to provincial partners and authorities who took part. And I also made promises at the national level, where through the SNIS project we had policy dialogues, to actually at some point come back and show this film and come across with a number of messages that potentially also could be useful in the long-term sustainability and outcomes of research. And it was a fascinating process. So in January, we were fortunate enough to actually have a final product to show. We made use of the fact that I was invited to a provincial workshop to present some research results again, to go back and also show the film. So that meant at the provincial level already, we arrived. We were able to show that film to an audience of local provincial stakeholders. And that already there generated a lot of interest and a lot of dialogue, to the extent, in fact, that local provincial media said, hey, we'd love to accompany you and when you go back and show the film in the villages, because that was another promise I had made. In the film, we try to show the story of local Arem elders, which is one of the smallest ethnic minority groups in Vietnam, who go back and basically explore and discover their ancestral base, which has today become a World Heritage Site, which today has become an area for tourism, and where they are no longer allowed to practice their customary hunting. We were able to show the film in the local school. We were able to show it also in a very sort of improvised manner with local batteries and a television screen that was brought in. Our film has been really surprisingly well received by local media. And I'd mentioned 2 levels. At the national level, UNESCO, with whom we've cooperated with over the years, decided to launch a new media network at the country level and use my presence and our film as a way to launch that media network. So it was an absolute privilege to sit together with 25 journalists from radio, television, and newspapers, show the film and have a discussion with them around the messages we had to communicate with the film, but also what we were trying to show, the story we told. And absolutely fascinating for me to see that it was well received. So we had several news reports coming out at the national level after showing this film. In a sense, I just wanted to share that message with other, the SNIS community, because in some respects, when we often write in the reports that we want to communicate our research results to wider policy audiences, but the question is, of course, always who's going to read our research report or our articles or the books we come out with. not necessarily that many outside the academic community, if we're honest and realistic about it. And I see these kind of films and the kind of policy briefs that we also used in our research project to be extremely effective communication tools to reach out to a different set of audiences. So that was the national level. At the provincial level, this generated a lot of interest by local media, and I think there are who went out and filmed our project activities, interviewed our project partners, interviewed myself, and ended up even making a small what do you call it? The local television made a small television program which lasts 15 minutes. I would very much recommend other SNIS research coordinators to use or explore the possibility of filming as part of their project. Now, there are a couple of choices, a couple of lessons that I would also insist upon. One is they need to recognize this is a powerful media, but it also requires considerable time and investment in order to do it properly. It's not something that you quickly wing at the end of the project, but ideally something that you actually plan to do from very early on in the research process. Now, why do I say that? For a couple of reasons. First of all, it does take a lot of time. Experience done myself, it required much more investment on myself and presence than I initially expected. And thirdly, if you plan it in advance, you also have a good opportunity to figure out the right moment to go and do the filming in coordination with the SNIS team here in Geneva. So therefore, consider the time, consider the logistics, but also consider the huge, enormous potential there is by using that medium to get your messages across.